Jeff Fuller back with you, pastor at Living Hope Wesleyan Church. Hopeforvermont.org is where you can find us on the web, hopeforvermont.org. Living Hope Wesleyan Church on YouTube, Living Hope Wesleyan on Apple iTunes, Google Podcasts, and at Hope for Vermont on Twitter and Facebook. And we try to share people's stories to hopefully encourage and inspire you. And one with a great story is Dave Mason. Dave, welcome in.
Hey, Jeff.
Hey, it's been a while, but so glad to finally catch up and do this. So we met a couple of times, I believe, but one that we both recall is at Rucker Park. I mean, we met before going to a missions trip to New York City. What led you down to New York City?
I was trying to figure out what year that was. I believe I was a youth pastor in Indiana at the time. I've done many a trip to New York City with different groups over the years. And I believe that I was coming from Indiana that year. And I met a young man who I believe you were a youth pastor at the time, and you had your youth group there too. We both had our youth groups there. And somehow we got started talking about basketball and found out you had a whole crew into basketball. And we knew of the legendary Rucker Park. And this was pre-iPhone, pre-much internet stuff. I think I came there on a triptych. I printed off maybe a Google Maps directions is how I got there. And we got some directions of how to find Rucker Park. We knew it was in Harlem. I think we knew what cross street it was. And me and your boys, and I don't know how I came with a group from Indiana, and none of the rest of us wanted to go to a basketball thing. But and if nobody knows, I mean, Rucker Park is the mecca for street basketball. So every basketball player ever. So me and you totally understand what it's like. You've seen videos. There's video games that include Rucker Park. It's just legendary. And we decided to go find it. And there I was with you. And do you remember, like, your boys, for whatever reason, decided to all shave their heads that day?
Yeah.
So this is all messed in my brain. For whatever reason, I don't know why you guys shaved your heads on a mission trip, but you just shaved your heads on a mission trip. Maybe it was hot. I don't know. But you had all these white boys with you and me, and we decided to go to Harlem. And we I think the express train, we were on the express train or something. For some reason, we had to get off before we thought the stop we were told to get off.
Right.
And we were like 10, 20 blocks short of where we needed to go. And so we ended up walking through Harlem. And I mean, Harlem is much safer than it ever would have been. And even then, safer than it was maybe back in the 80s or 70s. But that's still in your brain. And like, I was terrified. And I was with you guys. And that was back when like skinheads were like a thing. Like, like
for sure.
White nationalism. Now it looks like everything. Anybody can look. It could be a white nationalism. What we discover, everybody hides better. But back then, it was a little more apparent. People just shave their heads, and that's what you look like. You're like, hey, sweet, that's a racist. He's a white guy with a shaved head. I had hair at the time, so I was lucked out. You were with us, and I was just like, okay, sweet, not sweet. I was like, this is how we're gonna die. Like I was just like, this is how it goes. I was just like, well, if these guys are gonna jump us, I'm like, I'm at least gonna like be nice. So I was saying hi to everybody, and it was like right out of a movie. Like all these guys were just sitting on the stoops. Everything you picture in a movie of New York City. They're sitting on the stoops.
Yeah.
All these big black dudes. We're the only white people, non-black people, as far as I can see. I'm glad you were with us because at least it meant like, okay, one of us at least isn't white. Then it's like, okay, maybe that'll help us some. And I was just like, I'm saying hi. Hey, how you going? I'm like, hey, if I'm gonna get killed, at least I'm gonna say hi to him first.
Oh, it's so funny.
And we came around that corner. And they were like, we asked directions, like, hey, do you guys know where Rucker Park is? And the guy was like, you go down under that underpass, and it's right there. And we walk down, and he hops on a cell phone as soon as we leave. And this is burned in my brain. I was like, that's it. He's calling his buddy. He was like it was a shop. He was working on like really nice cars. There was like a Bentley and a Maserati or something out front. I was like, okay, that's a chop shop. That guy's sending us down. Somebody's gonna jump us when we get to the bottom of this thing. And we go down. I'm like, well, this is it. This is how it goes. Here we go. And I go down the hill, and then we come up, and then that sign pops up, the New York City park sign with the logo. And it says Rucker Park.
Yeah.
And then we're standing outside, and we look in, and it's the coolest thing I'd ever seen. It was all I hoped Rucker Park could be. And they even let us in to go watch the girls' game.
Yeah.
We had to go to a missions thing that night.
Right.
And I still, fond memories of that trip, man. That was so much fun.
So it's so funny because one of those students, his parents actually attend the church that I'm pastoring now, and they
don't know that you almost killed them. Now they know.
Well, they know. Why did you guys all shave your heads? And I'm like, at the time I thought it was a good youth bonding experience, but then realizing we all look like a bunch of thin white guys with shaved heads in the middle of the inner city, it probably wasn't my best choice at that time. But anyway, we made it out. Good friendships, good memories. But I just want to bring up the website now where you're currently working, and slwc.ca. This is Silver Lake Wesleyan Camp. I actually was a counselor there way back when, but you guys are doing a ton. How did you first get involved with Silver Lake?
I grew up coming to Silver Lake. I think my parents got a tent trailer here when I was 3 or 4 years old, like young enough. I don't even like. I vaguely remember having the trailer in the trailer park and being too scared to walk over to the bathroom at night. And I would pee off the little entrance to the things you remember when you're a kid, right? So since I was a little bit, I've been coming here, and a couple years after that, or a year after that, bought a cottage here, and this has been my summer home. This has been the place that we have come. Soon as school let out, my mom was a full-time mom, and as soon as school let out for this year, we would move up here, and we would spend our summers here. And this is the place I made my Christian friends. This is the place I got to know Jesus. This is the place I got to catch frogs and try to hustle and sell them to fishermen to make some money so I could buy pop from the tuck shop in those glass bottles of Orange Crush. And yeah, so this is that place for me. And my parents still have a cottage here, so I've always come back. This is the place I've always come back to whenever I had a job somewhere else. Even as I was going between jobs and I'd be interview placing, I'd kind of be like, okay, what's the summer vacation schedule kind of like? Am I allowed to go to Ontario? And make sure that was always a possibility. So I was always trying to, no matter where I was in my life, I tried to get up here a week or two every summer. And yeah, so this place has been a part of my life, my entire life. This is where I gave my life to the Lord. This is where I learned about Indian Wesleyan. This is where I got led to go to Indian Wesleyan. This is where I met many of my best longtime friends. And yeah, so I've been familiar with this place for a very, very long time.
Now, for myself, I grew up going to camps and being a part of whether it's a Wesleyan, Nazarene denomination. It always seems like summer camp is a huge part. But as of late, or the last several years, there's been this thought that camps have run their course. And I actually go back and forth. Sometimes I see the tremendous value. Other times I'm like, maybe there is another ministry that we could reach those same students. What is it about camp, getting in the middle of nowhere, having campfires, being with strangers that you soon become friends with? What makes camp so special?
I think like nature's part of it. Like nature's part of it. I think getting out of your norm is part of it. That's why those trips to New York were so great for me, was for us taking, kids or small town New Brunswick kids down to New York City, was out of your norm. And there was something about getting out of your routine and doing something for an extended period of time. So not like an afternoon, a weekend works, but a week, maybe longer, is even better. And there's something special about getting that time of getting away. Like Jesus went off into the wilderness for a time. The Israelites spent 40 years camping. I often hear what you're saying. They're like, oh, maybe camping ministry has run its course. I'm like, okay, cool, that's cool. But this has been going on for 6,000 years. I'm like, okay, that's fine. Like, yeah, great, sweet. In 2012, it took a little bit of a dip, but it's not going anywhere. Like, if 6,000 years can't get rid of camping, nothing's getting rid of camping. And so for me as a kid, and that's my experience, right? This is where I experienced Jesus. This is where I stepped out of my norm. I came to the wilderness. I spent time with people that loved Jesus, and they bestowed that love upon me. And there's just something special about that. I think the nature, the fresh air, we happen to be on a lake, we own an island. So all those things are just kind of perks alongside of that. But it's just getting out of your space, right? Like, and everybody's moving to the cities. I mean, now everybody's online, right? With pandemic, I know you guys are a little bit ahead of us, maybe down in Vermont than where we are here in Ontario. But people are like emerging out of their cocoons, looking out, seeing the sun for the first time, blinking a few times, and being like, oh yeah, like it's pretty awesome out here. Like you've seen Wall-E when they get off the spaceship, right? Like we're all kind of like that. Like we've been sitting in front of our computers too long, and now it's even that, like checking offline, right? Like the fact that we have crappy Wi-Fi here, so hopefully our connection stays. But we have pretty. Oh, did I go away there? That was
Yeah,
like perfect
you
timing.
went for a moment, but yeah, it was. I thought you planned it that way. So
There's something about that too, right? Like of unplugging, and I think that's only going to get more. I think outside of the pandemic, we don't realize how important getting away, coming here. Like when I moved here as camp director a few years ago, we had a bunch of cottages for sale, and it always made me sad. It was like all these signs. I'm like, oh, that could be a family that could be here experiencing this, and it made me sad that it was for sale. Now all our cottages, every single one of them for sale. We got waiting list on a bunch of, like, people are like, okay, let me know when a lakefront goes up. I get asked that about every week. And our trailer sites we're actually going to start expanding our trailer sites because we're running out of room for people. And then working out our camps, which is pretty incredible. But I think people are just seeing the value of getting away, coming up here, spending that time with Jesus, and yeah, I think it's incredibly valuable, and it will become even more apparent, and especially as we go more online, more meetings are online, more work is online. That's just going to push your body. Your body's going to just naturally know that it needs to get out. You need sunshine. You need that vitamin C. You need fresh air, a bonfire. Like, I don't know if like they have like some cooking things with Jesus in the Bible, but I always picture them around campfires. I don't know if that's actually written down or not, but I assume there must have been fires there at some point. Peter had the fire when he denied Jesus, but I don't know other than that. But like, I just picture them always kind of around campfires, and there's just something special of that fire crackle and that deep theological conversation with Jesus, right? So.
And again, Dave Mason makes some
Sorry
time.
if I keep losing you.
It's all right. The website is slwc.ca, slwc.ca. And for us during the pandemic, we have a fire pit, and I think we had a fire probably 6 days a week. And I do say days. We'd start it early and sit by it during quarantine. And there is something special about those relationships and the conversations that take place there. I just want to go back to something you said earlier about when you were a kid, you found the Lord at Silver Lake. How have you grown in your faith, or how did you grow in your faith when you left the safety of the camp and had to go back to school and just live life during the fall and winter?
I probably didn't. That was the thing, right? Like, in the 80s and 90s, maybe that was more of a thing than now. I mean, I think kids are blessed today because I look at them and they make a friend at camp, and they can, find each other on Instagram, find each other on Facebook, use Telegram, use whatever communication they want, WhatsApp, whatever you choose, and they can stay in communication. Us, we had you probably didn't get anybody's phone number because it was long distance, so you weren't going to call them. You might get their address and you could write them a letter, but you never did that. So you just lost communication. So these friends you made, this connection you made with Jesus, just kind of disappears as soon as you go back to school. And for me, school was a pretty scary place. I was in a public school, and as far as I knew, I was the only Christian in like my grade, right? And I, over time, at the beginning, good Christian kid, didn't cuss, didn't do, bad stuff, and didn't go with girls who do, or however that saying goes, right? And I was a good Wesleyan kid, so I wasn't even allowed to go to dances, so I'd have to sit in this special room during school dances. If you ever want to feel like an outcast, sit in the special room during a school dance when everybody in your school is dancing, and that's their chance to like meet girls and stuff, and you're the one not even in there. And so I had that, and then somewhere along the line, I realized my parents weren't watching maybe at school, and maybe my faith early on was just kind of following the rules my parents had set for me. And I started living like two lives, right? Like I would have my life at school, and that person would live the way the other kids were living, right? Say the things other kids were saying. I would make fun of people because I have a little bit of a quick wit. So I found that if you teased somebody and made fun of somebody, then people weren't laughing at you. So that was just an easy way to avoid scars, right? So you picked on people. So I did that for a long time. Like that was in the high school, and I would come to summer camp. I would go to youth group or whatever, and I would rededicate my life to Jesus for like the 13th time, and it just never would stick, right? Like, God, I'm so sorry for those things, man. I want to go home. I want to witness to my friends. I want to bring them to you, and it just didn't stick. And yeah, and I got a ways, dabbled into some substances that I shouldn't have been doing. Tried, smoking anything and everything I could get my hands on. Didn't have much of a self-esteem at the time, so didn't really care about life. So me and a couple friends had a try anything kind of attitude, right? It was just like, if you die, you die. You're like, don't like life much anyway. This isn't very much fun. And I got into taking drugs and even selling them, because I was the good Christian kid. So I had friends who saw me as that, and they were scared of the big bad drug dealers. But the big bad drug dealers were also friends of mine. So it was just like, yeah, I was just this middleman that like could get along with everybody. So it was just like, yeah, I'll go over, like, that's my buddy. We played hockey together. Or like, we were in grade 4 together. Like, yeah, here, I'll go talk to him. No problem. I'm not scared of whatever, right? Because he's just a friend. He's just a person, right?
Yeah.
And it wasn't until like kind of that last year of high school I came up here, and had I'll be frank with you. I've told this before. It's been a long time since I've shared these stories, but it's not like I haven't shared them before. But I had a big pile of LSD that I brought with me here, and I was ready to go and have a wonderful summer. And I thought that's how we would spend our summer. And I ended up watching a video and at a youth group, and they shared about a guy who was struggling with attraction, and I know that's a touchy subject these days. Looking back, I don't know where it was, but it was important for me. And he gave that of himself to God. Like, he was just like, I'm going to give this, my sexuality, to you, God, and you do with what he was. Like, if I need to be celibate, I'll be celibate. If this is whatever, and he chose to do that. And God ended up helping him, and he married a woman and all these things, and that was like kind of his testimony. And at the end, the youth pastor said, hey, if there's anything in your life that you need to give up to God, and you don't know what to do with it, you could do that now. And I gave up the drugs, right? I was just like, okay, I don't want to do these things anymore. I decided I did want to live. I wanted to not, wreck my mind or my body, and I decided to give those up. And I didn't know what to do then, because I had a friend who was doing them with me, and he didn't make the same decision. So I decided how I was going to do that. I ended up having to tell my parents. I had to sit my parents down and be like, hey, this is what I was doing. I don't know. Like, usually you get caught, right? Like, usually you, like, every story you hear, like, somebody gets caught with, whatever stash they have, and that's when the parents come down, or the cops bring you home or something, right? Like, I like self-confessed. I like turned myself into my parents. We flushed everything I had left down the toilet, and God like really helped me through that. And I actually decided later, I was like, okay, God, I gave you that. He helped me with that, and then I decided to give my life. I was like, sweet God, if you can like help me with that thing, you help me with this step, this hardest thing, one of the hardest things I ever had to do at the time. You can help me through with the rest of my life. I decided to give the rest of my life to God. I was like, and it stuck that time, right? Yeah. And so then I went back my last year of high school, and I had friends like literally calling me up, being like, hey man, he's like, can you give me a score or whatever? I was like, oh dude, I actually don't do that anymore. I found this guy Jesus, and like I'm now going to like Bible studies. They're like, what, you idiot, what are you doing? I'm like, right. I'm carrying my those little red New Testaments we used to have. I used to carry one of those around with me in high school. I'd be reading in between class, and people were like, what happened to this kid? He was the guy that could score us drugs, and now he's talking about Jesus. And they're like, what? Like, where do you come from, right? So, yeah, that was my kind of story. And it was back in the day. I remember I got convicted about the music I was listening to, and I got rid of all my music and started listening to Christian music. And luckily, MXPX was on the scene at the time, and they changed my life. I was like, sweet, I can stop listening to this stuff. I'm gonna start listening to these guys. And I would bring these like underground Christian punk rock albums to school on CDs when we had CDs. Yeah. And you'd share them with people, and I'd introduce people to music that way. And yeah, that's when God got a hold of my life. That's when I decided Indian Wesleyan was for me. Well, the next summer I decided Indian Wesleyan was for me, and yeah, that's when it kind of stuck. So I get it. Like it's hard, man. It's hard being a Christian in a secular world, right? Like if you're at a public school and like none of your friends are Christians, like that's a lonely existence. Like that's a hard thing to be. So I encourage kids here that I work with to be connect with somebody. Like if it's your leader, if it needs to be me, like if you need to write me, I'll stay connected with you throughout the year, right? Like having that person that has faith with you, that you can stay, that you can walk this journey with, because we weren't meant to walk alone, right? Like we were meant to walk this in partnership, as you're doing now with your church, as you're doing this online, so that people can share these stories, right? Like it's all about this. And I was missing that for a long time in my life. And later on, had some great friends that I stayed connected with, then got to New Weston, and a whole bunch of other crazy stuff happened. And yeah, that's that.
So Dave Mason makes up time. Instagram, it's at Baby Mace, at Baby Mace. Dave, when you picked Indiana Wesleyan, did you know that you were called to vocational ministry, or what was that process like?
That's another interesting story. I don't think I've ever been called to vocational ministry. I was never called as a kid. I did a co-op. We had co-op in Canada where I don't know if you had that, where you could like spend half of your senior year doing like practical training at a job site. Okay. You could do some job stuff, right? And, my family leans probably on the science, math type side of the spectrum. And that was kind of the classes I was taking. And so I signed up for one co-op at a science thing, a big science institution in Ottawa, the experimental farm. And I was doing lab work, right? So I was in a lab, had like the beakers and fancy sciencey stuff. And it was like, it would have been the epitome of what I was taking kind of in school. But you're not with any people. And I was just like, whoa, this is like super interesting. Like it was like, I still think, I'm like, man, those things, like I was using test tubes and this little, that was like centrifuge that would spin this stuff. And I was looking for pollen, and it was something to do with plants. I can't exactly remember, but I remember being like, felt like I was in an X-Men movie kind of thing, right? Like it was those kind of things. Like I see them in movies now, like, hey, I used one of those, right? Like it was kind of cool, but at the same time, really kind of boring, because it was just you, and like you interacted with your science boss once in a while, but like there's not much interaction. And then I did another co-op with a kindergarten class, and the teacher was awesome. I think she was just like an older lady that just let me do whatever. Like I think she kind of changed my life. You know, they talk about teachers that change your life. She wasn't my teacher. She was a teacher I was helping with. But I think she was like old enough and wise enough and didn't care enough that she just kind of let me do stuff. I should have been just like making copies. I had other practicums later on copies her. This one was just like, no, you're gonna go teach the class. And she put me in charge of a little boy. And I don't know what he had. Like he had some sort of developmental disability of some sort. And his name was Eric. And I'll never forget him, because she put me in charge of him. I think he was in grade 2, but he would come to the kindergarten class because that was his developmental level. And so half the day he would come, and then I was his like buddy. My job was to kind of like take care of him or whatever. I spent the days with him. And I even took him to the bathroom. I think I even had to like wipe his bum. And I'm like, how is that? Like, I should be arrested. Like, I don't think you're allowed to touch anybody, right? Like, I'm like, this is the 90s. I guess you were allowed to do things like that back then. And I remember just coming out of it being like, no, like this people thing, like these kids, like I wanna do that. Kindergarten Cop was a big movie. I was like, I want to be that. I want to be that influence on the kids, because I would remember, I'd think back, I was like, what was the grade when you like stopped, when you started like hating school, right? Like when did you last love school, right? Like was it grade 5? Was it through middle school? Was it high school? And it was like, me, it was like kindergarten. I was like, no, kindergarten was fun. Like that was like, you played all day, like it was learning fun. And then all of a sudden you had to like do class and math after that. And I was like, no, take me back to kindergarten. So I was like, let me do that. So I knew I wanted to be I decided I wanted to be a kindergarten teacher. And I applied at some schools around the area. And then that following summer, some people came up, an awesome guy named John Sullivan, who was a guy from the area. And he was on the ministry team, and I really looked up to him. And he'd been around. He'd been my youth leader over the years. I think he was like counselor that week. And he told me about this school, and I found out they had a really good education program. I was like, I need to go to that place. Wow. And I had been accepted to schools here my job was, I think I was gonna like be a firefighter and then be a bartender. Like I was just like, where do people go that they need to hear about Jesus the most? I was like, well, if I'm a bartender, like I wanted to be like Sam Malone and Cheers. I was like, I could be the guy that doesn't drink, but I could just be there when somebody's at their lowest and I can tell them about Jesus. I was like, and then that bartending money would put me through firefighting school to be a firefighter. That was kind of like, but then this education thing popped up, and I remember it was like July, August that I applied, right? Like school starts in September. And I got accepted. How I got accepted, I don't know. But I did. I didn't have the greatest grades. And they let me in. And then we didn't have any money. It was an expensive school. And my parents owned our cottage through just another God kind of thing that happened a long time ago. But because they owned their home and owned their cottage, it looked on paper like we had money when we didn't, right? And so we didn't qualify for any of the loans. We didn't qualify for any of the grants you could get. And a crazy other coincidence was when I was little, I think it was in grade 3 or so, my uncle had won the lottery, and they won like millions. And we had always been told like we didn't want money to ever be a thing. So like my parents were like, we're never asking them for money. Like that's their money. If they, whatever, like we're not expecting anything. They're going to be the same people they were before they won it. We're going to treat them the same. Don't ever, like, whatever. That was my parents' attitude. And that was, like, and same. They were still my aunt and uncle. And I remember my dad being, hey, we're going to go ask your uncle for the money. We've never asked for anything. We're not going to ask him to give it to you. We're going to ask him to loan it to you at the same rate you would have got the Canadian grant to go to school. And we asked them, and they said yes. And they gave me the same loan, same payoff for whatever terms and stuff like that. And I got to go to Indian Wesleyan. So I love to say, like, right, like I got led to Indian Wesleyan because of the lottery, and because I became a Christian because of a formerly gay person, or maybe a person who was still struggling with homosexuality. Like, I'm like, so these are these things you're not supposed to do, right? Like I was like, so I don't know, like, yeah, sure, gambling's bad, but I wouldn't be here without it, right? Like, like homosexuality is the worst, whatever. I don't know, but it's like I wouldn't be a Christian without that man sharing his story, right? Like. And it's just like I'm just like, okay, God just keeps using these things in my life, maybe just to keep me humble, maybe just to be like, stop judging stuff. But yeah, so that I got in Weston, I think in August. I think I had like a week to pack. Went down because school starts before September down there, and they dropped me off. Had my clothes all in my hockey bag, and I was sitting there in a dorm room in Marion, Indiana, not having a clue about life, and had to figure it out from there. So,
man, that's awesome. I love hearing these stories, and it certainly reminds us that God has a plan, and we can develop our own methodology, but God's going to do what He's going to do with sensitive hearts and with the right people. I go back to the boy Eric that you helped out with, but even more that teacher to entrust you to give Eric the care.
Yeah,
that has to be a defining moment. How have you allowed people like yourself to, I guess, pass or fail by the care that they provide for others? Is that something where, like, you see a counselor kind of struggling, but you see a camper that would really benefit? Like, for me, it's understanding to give up control. And I just think whether that teacher was really old and she didn't want to handle it or deal with it, or she really saw something special in you. Have you learned to apply that principle in your daily ministry and in your life now?
That one, I may look old with the beard, but I'm not the old wise person quite yet. But I'm trying to learn that one, right? Like, to be like, it is better to give up some of that control, probably a lot of the times, probably more often than I'm ever going to admit, and let something not go as well as it could, right? Like, I got an ego problem, and I'm like, but I'm the best at everything, so why should I not be doing everything? When it's like, well, no, the truth is I'm not the best at everything. I might just think I am. And so letting people try and fail, letting myself try and fail is hard. Letting other people try and fail is harder, but you see it. And I'm forced to here. I was forced to in youth ministry, and I'm forced to here of just letting your leaders, letting your director kind of go, and do their thing, and offer guidance when you can, but let them try stuff. And even stuff like, you're like, I think that might not work, or you can say, hey, well, why don't you try it this way? But yeah, like we tell the counselors at the beginning of the summer, it's just like, yeah, you're gonna mess up. Like a kid's gonna be sad, or you're gonna be late for something, or you're gonna whatever, right? Like something's gonna happen. Like a kid's gonna get hurt. Like no matter, we're gonna keep everybody safe. We're gonna follow all our guidelines. Kids keep breaking their arms or falling down or getting poison ivy. Like we're at a camp. Like stuff happens, and it's just like you have to let yourself and you let your teams fail in that way. But that's like, I mean, that's just one I'm learning. I said, like, it's a good reminder today. Like I haven't thought about Eric and that story in the longest time. And there was another teacher in college that did the same thing. Again, she was just an old wise lady. I think she was half a year from retirement, and she just let me take over her kindergarten class. Right? Like, and I wasn't sure. I was doing education major. It was all schoolwork. I was like, this doesn't seem like I wanted it to be. Like, this is a whole bunch of academic stuff. It's like, I wanted to like go teach. I don't want to learn. Like, and then I got to this kindergarten placement, and she was just old. And I said, maybe you're right. Maybe she just didn't care anymore, or maybe she just felt like getting the time off. But I think there was something more. I think she was just wise. Like, I think she was just like, yeah, no, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if he screws up, because what I learned from that is more important than whatever that failure, right? You don't fail or succeed. You succeed or you learn, right? Like,
right.
There is no failure. That's just like, you just learned one other way to not do it, right? Like, and then it's like, sweet, now you know one thing not to do. Now let's learn a bunch of things to do. And like, having that, like, letting, yeah, and then giving that same grace to yourself, right? Like, to be like, try some stuff. Like last summer, we tried to run a day camp, and we're not a day camp. We're an overnight camp. It's been an overnight camp for 60 years. And a pandemic happens. And but 2 weeks before the summer starts, the government opened it up to allow for day camps, and we realized we could do it. And we had a bit of a plan in place, but we didn't really know what it was going to look like.
Sure.
And we're like, we're going to try this. Like, we're going to go for this. And it could be an epic failure. But it might not. And we thought, we have a mission here, our vision, mission, I get them all confused, but it's to share the love of Jesus with as many people as possible through camp ministry. Nice and simple, right?
That's great.
And I always thought that meant as many as possible meant that I was supposed to go to all the churches I could and go to every event I could and do the best Facebook marketing and make our webpage look as nice as it could, have our Instagram post and have the best pictures and best videos, the best music, and try to sell this place, right? Like, to market this place. And that was my job, to get as many as possible, right? That it's like, the more that come in, the better I'm doing a job. And God reminded me, like, no, as many as possible is just whatever's possible. Right. And if you're limited, we were limited last summer because of day camps. We could only have so many. And God was just like, if 3 kids show up, that's as many as possible. And you're to share the love of Jesus, love of me with them, regardless. And that's your job through camp and ministry. And that's what we did, right? And we started out, I think we lucked out. We ended up like 16 at the first camp. Like, we were like, what do we do if there's like 2 kids? Like, we were like, so what's the number, like, where we like can't do this? Like, is it 4? Is it 10? Is it 3? Like, luckily 16 kids showed up, and then that was our smallest camp all summer. More and more kids came each week. Wow. And we opened up in a pandemic, and we made it safe. We kept our masks on for many of our activities. We spread out whenever we couldn't. We opened our motel rooms to individual families. We did extra cleaning in between to keep everything safe and spray everything down and wipe our surfaces and all that stuff. And these families, blinking out in the sun for the first time, some of them dropping their kids off that first day, that first week, the first time they'd come. They dropped that kid off, and like, they had been with their kid for 3-4 straight months, right? Yeah. Like, they hadn't been out of the house. Like, they hadn't had no babysitters were coming over. There was no school time. There was no hockey. There was no sports. There was no nothing. And I'd see them. They'd come sit down on the beach. My cottage is right beside the beach. The parents would come sit on the beach, and just this sense of relief just coming down their face of like, whoa. Like, and so that's what we gave. That was our sharing the love of Jesus that summer. It was not just to those campers, was to those families, to those moms and dads, some single moms, single dads that hadn't had a break in so long. We gave them rest. Come to me, all who are heavy burdened, I'll give you rest. We got to do that part, that tangible part of being Jesus. And we took that risk, right? And we were like, hey guys, and it was awesome. Best part of that was I had our staff sign up for it. We signed up before we could do day camps, and we had some summer job credits come in, which would help us pay for it. But we didn't know what the summer was going to like. We didn't know if day camps were going to happen. So I had these kids sign up to work with us, not knowing if they were going to be camp counselors or we were going to be like prepping the trails for this next year, right? Like we're like, we might be closed. We might be painting cabins all summer long. You might be just cutting grass and like trimming trails and doing that kind of work and doing grunt work. And to a T, they all signed up, every single one of them.
That's awesome.
Some of them that we had early hired on as counselors weren't able to be counselors and ended up switching to other jobs. So we had to put extra people in housekeeping because we needed all the extra cleaning because of COVID. And we ended up needing some extra help in the kitchen because of the extra protocols you had to follow. And these kids, without blinking, would step into these other saying, here to serve Jesus. And if that means and if that means getting to hang out with kids all day and play with them all day, that's awesome. And if it means driving the boat, I'll help drive. Like, you know, there's certain jobs you want to do at camp. You've been to camps, you know, like, and there's certain ones you don't want to do. And these kids just did it. And they signed up without knowing. Like they signed up with that faith of just, no, I'm here to serve Jesus. And if we get to have camp, awesome. And if we don't, we're still going to serve Jesus. And it was pretty awesome to see.
Well, that's phenomenal. And I want to say, and it sounds like I'm blowing smoke, but I'm not. It really reflects your leadership to have people involved, that they're just saying, whatever it takes, we're going to get it done and do it and bring God glory, whether we have 16 kids or we have 1,600 kids. My question for you is, how have you been able to stay refreshed when this last year and a half, it's been so tiring and you're just weary? How have you been able to stay fresh?
Taking breaks. Like I said, luckily I live at a campground, so we live here on site. So that has its pluses and minuses. One of the minuses in the winter, it gets really quiet up here when the camp closes and there's no one else around, and there's definitely some mental health struggles you go through in that loneliness. Yeah. So in a way, we were prepared because we've been doing this for 3 years. We were like, oh, so what's it like to like be at the camp in the winter? I was like, remember how COVID was? It's like, well, that was our life for the last 4 years. Like that's every winter. That's not just COVID for us. And so we were prepared a little bit for it, but honestly, I'm still figuring that out. Like getting outside, getting exercise, spending that time with the kids. So we live at the campground, so it's nice. We can get out and play outdoors. We have all kinds of space to use. It's a little better when the snow goes away, but when the snow's there, we can still sled and do things or go out on the ice. And we did do something crazy. We did invest. I call it an investment, and it was the worst investment probably ever in a Sea-Doo this past winter. I think I call it like the SS COVID, just because I was just like, I didn't know what the summer was going to be like, right? We didn't know if we were going to have anything. I was like, we needed a win as a family. We live on the water, and it's like, we need to be able to get out there. We didn't have anything to do that with. And we're like, we need to be able to do that. And so like hopping out on that thing when it's getting crazy and taking a break, and we already have it in the water and it's cold, but we go out anyway. And it's just a blast to get that time away. I find connecting with people, like doing this, like what we're doing right now, I found I had to like force myself. Like where usually it was like you had your reasons to get together with people, right? Like you kind of had your wing night, or you had if you get together for cards, or you get together for pick up hockey or basketball, or you go to the movies or whatever those things you usually would have done. Those were all gone, right? And I found I needed that thing. And I tend to be a loner and tend to be an introvert and think, oh, I don't need any of that, and realize, I kind of did. And so I intentionally text somebody, hey man, you want to catch up? I'm like, oh, what do you need? I was like, oh, I don't need anything. I need you. I just need to talk to me. I just need to talk. And what do you want to talk about? Well, nothing. I just want to chat about life. And those connections, you realize how important those are. And so making a lot of phone calls, try to connect on Zoom from time to time, get together with some buddies. We play some cards on some internet weird website that lets us play cards together. And we were talking that day, it's like, I think I lost like the last 13 weeks in a row. And it's like, oh, I'm sorry, man. He's like, you'll get back. He's like, well, it doesn't matter. Like, it's not about the cards, right? Like, not about the cards. It's not about the wings. It never was.
Right.
It's about that connection. And so reaching out, getting into my Bible, spending that time with Jesus, getting out in nature here. And now that the weather's turned, it gets kind of easy. Right. It's the cold, dark winters when it was harder. But and spend time with family. We started doing game night with the family, and just having that fun time together. Like, well, we can't go out for fun, so we're going to create our own fun. And yeah, we've been doing that. So those things have been helping. But honestly, I've been figuring it out as we go, and I'm ready. I'm ready for it to be over. I'm ready to meet people in person again, grab a coffee, go out for wings, play pickup, some sport, and I'm ready for all that stuff to be back.
Oh, for sure. This is Dave Mason at Baby Mace on Instagram, Baby Mace on Instagram, and check out the website for Silver Lake, slwc.ca. That's slwc.ca. But Dave, we'll get you out in a little bit. But I do thank you for the time that you're making and spending and sharing with us. And I just appreciate being Christian brothers and being able to reach out and share honestly about different things we've been through that we've had to process. And it isn't easy. Being a Christian is not easy, but it certainly is better. Can you just share, if you were talking to your 15-year-old self, that maybe you would say, give up the drugs a little bit earlier, what advice would you have received when you were 15? Not what would you tell your 15-year-old self, but do you think you really needed to have that maturity of when you were, 17, 18? Or what advice would you have listened to when you were 15 years old?
Not much is the true. Like, I was given all kinds of advice when I was that age, and I didn't listen to most of it. I think the people that spoke, I don't know if you consider it prophecy, because it's like you're speaking something into existence. I don't know what that is called, but I'll never forget. And I don't even know who it was. Somebody that came up to me when I was a punk kid that age, goofing off in the back of the chapel, not paying attention to the services, getting in trouble, sneaking out of your cabin or whatever at night. And he came up to me and he said, he's like, "You're going to lead people someday." I'm like, I'm no leader. Like, I was like, I'm just lucky to have a friend. Like, I don't, like, look at me, like, no one wants to hang out with me. Like, I was like, and he's like, "No, you're gonna lead people someday." And like, it stuck with me. Like, it was this thing that I was like, I don't even know if he knew me. I don't know why he said that. He probably said that to every kid he met that week. I don't know. But for some reason it stuck with me. So I try to do that. Like, I try to speak into people's lives and not in a super uber charismatic way, although I believe that's possible as well. It's not my gifting, I don't think, or maybe I don't know it yet. I mean, I grew up Wesleyan, so I don't get to experiment in that area of the spirit very much. But I try to do that with people. Like, just say, "Man, like, you're doing really good at that thing. Like, you could do that thing, right? Like you could be a leader. You could lead people. People will follow you. Just talk about people, how awesome they are. Like, try to speak positivity." That same kid who was 15 and used that wit to make fun of people, right? So that I wouldn't get made fun of. Right. That if I picked on them before somebody else picked on me, then maybe they would notice me, and they wouldn't notice that I was also wearing funny looking clothes of some sort, whichever wasn't cool that day. That I could turn that wrath to somebody else. That same wit, that same ability can be turned on its head to be like, no, now you're going to speak life. You were speaking death, and now you can speak life. And I want to do that, right? Like, to my kids, tell them how proud I am. No matter how the game goes, man, you did your best, and that was awesome, right? And I'm so proud of you. That drawing, man, look how good that drawing is. It's a 4-year-old's drawing. It's a terrible drawing. It's not a great drawing, but it is a great drawing, right? Because you said it was a great drawing. And you find the positives. Like look at Bob, is it Bob Goff, right? Like that, like those just. I don't know. I talk about this all the time, but I don't know if you're watching Ted Lasso at all.
I'm not. No, I haven't seen it.
Man, you have to. And he's just pure hope. He's like, he like they described it when they wrote it, like they were just like, he's the anti-Trump. And I don't want to get political on your thing, but like how Trump is just kind of a bully, like whatever, you like him, hate him, whatever. But it's like he's kind of a mean dude, regardless. Like he calls people's names. That's just his thing. And this guy is like, and everything's always somebody else's fault, and like everything, you know, the world's coming to end. Like this guy is like the opposite of that. He's this football coach, American football coach, who is coaching British soccer. It's kind of a joke, right? Yet he's just pure hope, and he speaks hope into people's lives. And he's like, they lose a game and they like throw a party because they're like, yeah, but we're here together. Like he finds that like silver lining, that hope in all situations. And I'm just like, I want to be that. I want to speak life. I want to be like Jesus, right? Like where you just come into people's lives and you just speak life, right? And like we met people like, I mean, our good friend, I saw you had him on the podcast, Dan Lamus, a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
And he's that guy, right? Like you talk to Dan.
Yeah, he is. And
you feel better about yourself, right?
Yeah.
Some people like will kiss up to you, right? Like they say smoke, they'll blow smoke to make you feel better about yourself because there's something they're looking to get out of it.
Sure. Dan
does that. He's not ever getting anything out of it.
Right.
He is just like that with everybody, whether he's on a podcast with you in front of a whole bunch of people watching, when he's on a stage and everybody's looking, or if he's in a little room by himself and it's just you and him, he's that exact same guy and he's speaking life into him. So my time I got to spend with him, I got to spend about 10 years with that guy. And along with, of course, all the mission trips we went on before that. But that kind of person. And so my goal is to be that person, to go from that 15-year-old who is speaking death to a 44-year-old who hopefully can speak life into the next 15-year-old. And just have that positivity, hope, Jesus way of loving on people. So,
Dave, that's great. That's great. And may we all aspire to that for sure. And Dan Lamus, I love him. That guy's tremendous. The final question, this I stole from Hernando Planos. He has a Be Contagious podcast. I've got to interview him a couple times. If, or in your case, when the feature film is made about Dave Mason, that's made about your life, who plays
Denzel Washington?
Denzel. There you go. Hey, my wife would watch that. She'd be the first one to sign up and watch that. But there you go. Dave, we wish you all the best. Thanks again for making the time. And if there's ever anything else I can do to help you out or be there for you, know that we're brothers from different mothers. And so thanks, man, for being here today.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
And again, that's Dave Mason. Check out the website, slwc.ca, Silver Lake Wesleyan Camp, slwc.ca. And if you're listening on the podcast and you want to follow Dave on Instagram, it's Baby Mace, BabymasE. With that, we're out. Hopefully we'll see you Sunday, 9 a.m. online, 4 o'clock in person. RSVP, let us know, and there's plenty of room. Thanks all.